members who were published by the press. We were founded here in D.C. in 1975 by a group of hippie poets, including the poet Grace Cavalieri, Maryland State's poet laureate, who is still involved with the press and who is celebrating her 90th birthday this week. Shout out to Grace. A few more things to share, and we'll be getting to our fabulous readings. The Washington Writers Publishing House is a literary press dedicated to publishing writers who live in D.C., Maryland, or Virginia. We publish poetry and fiction, and you're going to hear our 2022 winners today. But in 2023, going forward, we're going to add a third book and start publishing creative nonfiction. So we are currently open for submissions. We offer publication. We offer a $1,500 honorarium. We offer events like this. And then you are forevermore part of the press. So we hope you do submit to us. It's via Submittable. It's on our website, how to submit. We also, if you're not ready with a book-length manuscript, we have a bi-weekly journal called WWPH Writes, and we spotlight a poet and a prose writer in each issue, and that is also open for submissions. And if you have any questions about submitting to us, Jonah, my fellow co-president, and I are here to answer all questions, as are many people from our press. So I'm thrilled that we got such a good turnout. I'm always thrilled that Kathleen Wheaton is here as our past president and current fiction head. Just a shout out to her and the fact that she came straight from California to be here. So thank you, Kathleen, for everything. But with no further delay, I'm thrilled to introduce to you our 2022 award winner in fiction, Suzanne Feldman, for her short story collection, The Witch Bottle and Other Stories. And this is her first reading for us. This is our premiere of our new books. Just a little background on Suzanne. She received her master's in creative writing from Johns Hopkins University. She's the author of 5 novels, including, I should have asked you how to say this, Absalom's Daughters. Thank you. She was a Walter Dakin Fellow at the Sewanee Writers Conference in 2019. Her latest novel, Sisters of the Great War, from HarperCollins, was published in 2021 and has been nominated for a Lambda Literary Award. In 2022, she was also awarded an artist grant from the Maryland State Arts Council. And she met our WWPH residency requirement. She lives in Frederick, Maryland. Even more so, her collection of 6 short stories demonstrate a masterful command of her craft. I was drawn to all of her stories, but her title story, The Witch Bottle, about a man's obsession with his neighbor, is she an artist, a lesbian, a witch, was just so much fun. And then her last story in the collection, the longer layered Goat Island, about an artist, a potter's journey to truth or consequences, New Mexico, in search of herself, really spoke to me. As an artist searching for her own truths, I am hoping, betting that these stories will speak to all of us. So on behalf of WWPH, I'm thrilled to bring this collection to you and Suzanne Feldman to the podium.
Thank you, darlings. Thank you to WWPH for the win. And thank you to Politics and Prose for hosting us. Thank you to the Maryland State Arts Council for paying for the clothes that I bought yesterday. I really appreciate it. And thank you to my friends for showing up. Thank you, thank you. Without further ado, I will be reading The Witch Bottle, which is the title story. I'm going to move this microphone a little bit. And I hope you like it. The witch bottle. You know it's irrational, but you believe the nosy woman who lives next door is a witch. Not the kind of witch who casts spells, but a poisoner. You know that there is such a thing because you found it on the internet. You found the antidote, too. To avoid being poisoned by witches, take a blue bottle, fill it with your own fingernail clippings and hair, 6 metal nails, and a little urine. Cork it and bury it upside down in the ground. That's what it says on the internet. You'll be safe from the most intimate sources of poison. The question of why she wants to poison you is a good one. Maybe you scared her cat when you pulled into the driveway. Maybe she was using those binoculars she keeps on the back porch, which she says are for watching birds, but didn't like what she saw when she was peeping through your blinds from her own house. Maybe she didn't like the way you make love to your wife. Not that it's any of her business, not in any way at all. Even if your wife isn't all that pleased with your sexual technique, and puts up with it, and maybe said something to her girlfriends, which may have somehow gotten back to the witch next door. Maybe the witch thinks she'd be doing your wife a favor by getting you out of the way. The witch has a basement full of poisons and potions, if you listen to your kids. She lives alone and has no family to speak of. You tell your kids that it's nothing but a Halloween story that's gotten out of control, but deep in your heart, while you're looking around in the liquor store, you're keeping an eye out for something that comes in a blue bottle. You find 2 things: cheap Rieslings and a Bombay Blue gin. You buy a couple of bottles of Riesling because you think you'll drink that faster than the gin. The wine is cheap enough that you could just pour it out and use the bottle right away. You wonder how you're going to explain the fingernail clippings, the hair, and urine to your wife, much less the act of burying something in the backyard. The backyard is a carefully landscaped postage stamp, without a lot of room for a secret burial of a bottle or even a dead pet. When the dog died under suspicious circumstances last year, you left the body at the vet's to be cremated, and now the dog sits in a solemn wooden box on the mantel over the gas fireplace. You blame the witch. You know you do. You never talk about her if you can possibly help it. You think she might be a lesbian, even though she never has any company, male or female. You've never trusted women who have no use for men. It makes you feel insecure, like a parasite on the back of her version of society. She would feel perfectly justified, or you would feel perfectly justified in poisoning her first before she could get to you. Your wife and children are mostly oblivious to the witch next door and have never delved into the internet looking for preventions from poisoners, but you fear for yourself and your family. The only one who you think might be safe is the family cat, which jumps the fence between your house and hers without hesitation and sits, sunning itself on her patio while the witch's cat watches jealously through a window. You can't say exactly when you pinned her as a witch. Just a feeling about her, she puttered around in her own overgrown yard. It seems like she cultivates weeds. You've looked some of them up, like the burdock and lamb's ear, which seem harmless enough, even medicinal. But then there's the patio, with the nightshade growing right out there in the open in its own pot. A sure sign of a poisoner? At the block parties, which happen twice a year, in the summer after school's out, and in the fall just before Thanksgiving, she makes cookies, which you have noticed no one ever touches. It's tempting to ask the neighbors what they think. It's tempting to eat a cookie yourself. The hospital is only 10 minutes from your house, after all. How quickly could a nightshade cookie kill you? You have never seen her eat one of her own cookies, however, and so you never follow through on this impulse. On Halloween, she dresses as a fairy and hands out Milky Ways, Snickers, Three Musketeers, Hershey's Kisses, and other pre-wrapped industrially produced candy, so you don't worry about your kids eating that. What idiot witch would hand out poison candy on Halloween anyway, when everyone's on the lookout for razor blades and apples and glass shards? Besides, you are her target, not the neighborhood kids. You're certain of that. One day, between Halloween and Thanksgiving, you run into her at the grocery store. You're buying bread, milk, toilet paper, and sanitary napkins. She takes a look at your cart and gives you a strange sort of smirk, like you're both stockpiling for a winter storm, and at the same time, you have a wussiness in you that allows you to be pushed around by your wife to get the most intimate products the store has to offer. She's smirking at your manliness and your unmanliness at the same time. You don't know what to say, even when she says, hello. You just push the cart past hers and pray you don't end up in the same checkout line. How terribly awkward would that be? You pick up a steak and rush to pay and leave. You don't see her again for days after that. You work as a project manager for an engineering firm, which gives you flexible hours. You can work from home on certain days, which is nice. Your wife works as a shelf stocker at Walmart, so she's at work sometimes even on Saturdays and Sundays, which means you're either home alone or home with the kids after school. You do most of the cooking because of your wife's hours, which means you spend a lot of time looking through the kitchen window at the witch's doings next door. You've never seen her do anything like, say, draw a pentagram in chalk on her patio, or set out candles on the ground, but you just can't shake the feeling that she's out to get you and is simply biding her time until you let your guard down. One morning, when the kids are at school and your wife is out of the house, you call your mother, and after a while, you tell her your suspicions. You wouldn't mention them to anyone else, but your mother is superstitious and has already tuned into the fact that there's a lot of unexplainable shit going on in the world. She reads between the lines in the obituaries and has deep, abiding doubts about the Masons, but she's a good one to ask about the witch next door. Can she swim? Asks your mother. In the old days, they used to throw witches into a pond to see if they would float. People naturally float, you say. What could that possibly prove? What are you going to do if you can prove it? Says your mother. Your father, long dead, would disapprove of this conversation 100%. He had been a very practical man, a professional plumber, and only just put up with his wife's harebrained beliefs. I don't know, you say, but if she tries to poison me, I could have her arrested. What you need are antidotes, says your mother, and you tell her about the bottle, the difficulties you're having figuring out a place to bury it in the back. Just pick a spot, says your mother, sounding exasperated. Make sure she sees you digging the hole and putting it in. You can put a rose bush on top if it bothers your wife so much. My God, how big a hole do you even need? Not very big, you concede. Then just do it, says your mother, and she hangs up. The bottle is already packed and stoppered. You've been keeping it under the bed, where your wife won't find it. You take it down to the kitchen and peer out the window. Sure enough, the witch is sitting on her patio with your cat on her lap. You worry about the cat, but only for a moment. You go outside holding the blue wine bottle by the neck and get a shovel out of the small tool shed beside the back door. You glance sideways across the fence, which is only thigh-high. She has a good view of you, and you have a good view of her. You go slowly to the back corner of the yard, set the bottle between yourself and her so it's in full view, and begin to dig a hole. The ground is soft and yielding. Soon you're at bottle depth, then a little deeper, then at about 2 feet. You stop and look over your shoulder. Your cat has jumped back into his yard and is coming over to see what you're doing. The witch has gotten out of her chair and is standing with her hands on her hips, watching too. You turn the bottle over so it's pointing down, just like the instructions on the internet told you. Ease the bottle into the hole and begin covering it with dirt. You wonder what the kids will do if they ever end up digging around here. You finish covering the bottle and tamp down the dirt. The cat comes over and immediately pees where you've been digging, then scratches up the dirt in a pile to cover it. It's like a message. You turn to look at the witch. She smiles at you in a "you're nuts" kind of way, waves and goes back into her house. You, however, feel immediately better, proactive. Any evilness that has been cast in your direction will be trapped by the bottle. Better yet, it'll be deflected back at the witch like a boomerang of ill will. Though you've never really wished bad things on anyone, this is an exception. Being poisoned isn't something to take lightly, not with a wife and family involved, not when you're the main breadwinner and the kids aren't even in middle school yet. You brush off your hands, put the shovel away, and go back into the house to get some work done before noon. After lunch, you pause by the kitchen window to find the witch's cat digging in the freshly turned earth. Under any other circumstances, it would be a strictly territorial thing between cats. Now it's between you and the witch. You storm outside and shoo the cat, which is black with white paws, away. You turn to see the witch standing on her patio to receive, let's just call it what it is, her familiar. "Hey," you call across the yard, "keep your cat on your side of the fence." "Then keep yours on your side," she shouts back. Stalemate, you think. Cats will go wherever they feel like going unless they're locked inside. Still, you feel like you have the advantage in this situation. The bottle is too deeply buried for a cat. The only way for her to really get to it is to sneak over in the middle of the night and dig it out herself, in which case you'll just call the police and have her arrested for trespassing. But first you have to catch her at it. You glance over at the little patch of ground and think about staying up all night to guard it. How would you even know if she'd been over to dig it up otherwise? Would a motion detector and some sort of alarm be justified? That would mean a trip to the hardware store, which you don't have time for. You're already behind on this project, and tomorrow you actually have to go into the office, which means the bottle will be unguarded. You wonder if you should get a guard dog. But this seems like excessive thinking, beyond even what your mother would consider reasonable. You go back upstairs to work on the damn project and can hardly keep your mind on it. When the kids come home from school, you're in a terrible mood. When your wife comes home, dinner still isn't ready, and you feel like tearing your hair out. You wonder if it's not poisoning you have to worry about at all, but some kind of spell. You wish you could talk to your wife about this, but she would look at you like you were out of your mind, and frankly, you're beginning to have doubts about yourself as well. You go to bed that night, exhausted but barely sleep. You go down to the kitchen 3 times and turn on the outside light to see if anything is going on in the yard. Each time, nothing. The patch of dirt is undisturbed. Sometime around 2 in the morning, you fall deeply asleep. At 5, your alarm crashes into your dreams about peeing into the bottle. You wake up, get your shit together, and go to work before anyone else even gets out of bed. And I'll stop there. Thank you. Thank you very much. Buy my book.
Yes, we will. Thank you, Suzanne. I love that story. I apologize for that little interlude over there. I was trying to go live on Instagram, which shows you how much I know about going live on Instagram. And I just saw Hocus Pocus 2 last night. So I was like, oh, the witch stuff is in my mind. I love it. It's better than Hocus Pocus 2, though, I'll just say. All right, welcome. Hi, my name's Jonah Colson. I'm co-president of the Washington Writers Publishing House. Thank you all for coming out this afternoon. I have the pleasure of introducing Anthony Moll, who is a queer poet, essayist, and educator. They are the author of Out of Step, a memoir, a queer coming-of-age story about their experiences in the Army, which won the Lambda Literary Award and the Nonfiction Collection Prize. Anthony is a Ph.D. candidate in English, and they hold an MFA in Creative Writing and Publishing Arts from the University of Baltimore. You Cannot Save Here won the 2022 Gene Feldman Poetry Prize, of course, from the Washington Writers Publishing House. And Anthony lives in Baltimore, also meeting the requirement for our DMV status. When I first read the manuscript You Cannot Save Here, it was just, as Emily Dickinson, I think, once said, makes you feel like part of your head is cut off because it's that good. In You Cannot Save Here, the poems travel from lightness to despair and about halfway back, in a collection driven by mastery of language, image, and metaphor. Many of the poems delve into apocalyptic scenes and reveries. Maybe the end is near, or maybe it just feels like it. Either way, Moll offers beautifully crafted poems that can help you come to terms with a possible and perhaps inevitable apocalypse, but reminding us what is sacred and what can be loved. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you for that. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to see you all. I see old friends here. I see people I have not met here. This is lovely. I'm going to read from You Cannot Save Here, but first I want to thank you all. I want to thank Washington Writers Publishing House for making a home for this, but also for the just incredible history that they have, doing so much work for writers in the area. I want to thank Politics and Prose for having us. This is an amazing place. Yeah, it's rad, right? This is an incredible place. It's my first time reading here. And I want to thank you all for coming out. I know some are friends, some are pressmates, some are strangers. You could be anywhere. You're here on a Sunday, a rainy Sunday here in Poems, so I appreciate it. I'm going to start with the first poem from the collection. The collection, as Jonah said, it's about how we make sense of our lives and the small moments that matter when the days feel apocalyptic. This poem, it shares a title with the book. It's called You Cannot Save Here. And there's a quote in it. You'll recognize it. Those of you who are poetry nerds will recognize it immediately. The first day of the end, I don't do anything. Just sit in the dimness of midday room with unopened blinds. Lament the lack of energy needed to fry up egg alternative. Open the fridge more frequently than is practical. Eventually, a sun shower taps on the porch, breaking through soot-soaked sky, and the small dog at my feet needs a walk, so we suit up, each in mismatched Macintosh, and along the way, duck sauce couplets bloom from tossed-off takeout bags, while broken warblers call out car alarm songs. In the distance, I mistake a discarded t-shirt caught on almost budded branch for late spring's first heron. The end sounds so familiar, like, so Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down to day, like Sunday, like a half-gone song. Thanks. This next one is after Mary Oliver and John Berger. You all know Mary Oliver, the brilliant poet. If you don't know John Berger, he has this amazing lecture series and documentary called Ways of Seeing. This also has a very brief quote from Oliver in it. This is titled, You Cannot Save Here. Whole blocks give way to blight, and I darn my favorite sweater. I'm lying. I pay someone to darn my favorite sweater. I'm lying. I buy a new sweater, assuming endless supply. Skip my long-run day and stay indoors. Watch Ways of Seeing while working out a body I can't save in the long run, a body I can't afford to resolve and won't before the walls rot. The top of the world packs up and goes more quickly than we predict. I'm grinding experience points. The mirror sends me on a side quest. I clutch my gut like a hamburger, murmur 180 by April. Hail Mary, full of grace, I keep trying to do the one wild and precious life thing, make something lavender of the hooded crow's wailing cries, fold together a family of lovers who know the most poetic ways of barricading the doors. We get on with it as the fires start. Focus on breathing, anything sacred. The holiness of hands, of hand jobs, of starting gardens of garlic climbing through the floorboards, more tender names for orgies, for Aprils, for the last time the earth bows to the sun. You're very sweet, y'all. This next poem is called You Cannot Save Here. Morning gets angry and destroys a city. Not New York, too obvious, but suppose it's on the coast. Suppose we're the first to go. I picture Goya's Colossus and my empathy runs threadbare. Suppose I notice the raw meat of his back and fall in love. Suppose there are too few Armageddon songs about giants. The Norse, I suppose, and Nephilim. Okay, fine. So suppose what I want are more movies. Colossus, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. We'd see it in dim theaters, giant screen, and afterward, step into the parking garage's echo and oil slick, a perspective behind concrete and absence of concrete, brutalist framing for the aftermath of mourning or giant or indifference, our skyline swapped with fields of dandelion left unattended. This next one's after Lars von Trier. Do you know Lars von Trier, the filmmaker? Yeah, great. Have you all seen Melancholia? Yeah, okay, good. Thumb hands. Kirsten Dunst is in it. It is such a good film. It's one of my favorite apocalyptic films. This is after watching that film. This poem's called You Cannot Save Here. My favorite apocalypse starts with an orphan planet, starts with a wedding, starts with a star somewhere south of where it should be. My favorite apocalypse knows sadness refuses to work for circumstance. But who wouldn't want, washed in lavish sorrow, to spend the end tucked in taffeta gown as the sky bows to kiss an emerald lawn like a vow-bound believer? When we collide, I want sent off as my worst self, wrapped in black basque, riding a cross-eyed cub caught in a sand trap, unvexed by end times hailstorm. My favorite apocalypse consolidates: water bottle, takeout straw, SIM card, Chemex, combustion engine, fast fashion, black jacket, apple orchard, firstborn, not a breath left to ask. Are you happy? Aren't you happy? This next poem, you know how like when we started after the initial quarantine, we started going back to things and like bosses were like trying to pretend like things were normal and it was not normal, but we all had to half pretend it was normal. This poem's about that. It's called You Cannot Save Here. The seams burst and we still have to go to work. The waters rise and someone still asks you to put on a boot or tie, a smile, black slacks and or sneaks. Sell your hours while the West turns to ash, while the world covers a hacking cough. Gozer takes a downtown tower and cops refuse to shut down traffic along Pratt Street during rush hour. A rider appears on a dark horse on the Beltway's westbound lane, and 1,000 locusts swarm around each hoof as it hits the asphalt. The skies turn gray. The radio hums an annual fundraising drive. Your boss sucks his teeth on the other end of a call. Unprecedented times, yes, yes. New normal, yes, yes. I hope this finds you well. Fenrir stretches upward on his hind legs to swallow the sun. Just take care to find someone who can cover your shift. This poem's after Beast of the Southern Wild, another amazing apocalyptic film. If you haven't seen it, you should. And it opens with an epigraph from that film for the animals that didn't have a dad to put them on the boat. The end of the world already happened. It's titled You Cannot Save Here. 1. The truth is a group of crows is called whatever you want, poet. Call it a flock, name it a summer, an apocalypse, a sacred text. I ask my students to turn down the volume. Then I go home, get high, write about doomsday fires blinking on the horizon. 2. Consider the hummingbird corpse I saw on campus today, just outside the tall windows that welcome light into our classrooms. Its faded plumage no longer a shimmer in the air, but avocado green and black, barely a smear on flecked asphalt. 3. The end is gorgeous, like everything that can kill us. Scorpion, palisade, maybells, oil rainbowing the surface of the sea. 4. The horse chestnut down past the post office fills with 100 corvids, so I take the long way around. Having left my glasses at home, I look up, mistake starlings in the brass light for the bats who roost beneath the interstate. 5. Our resolve takes a form of tattoos, hog or cock or FEMA X code, a mark to remind us of a shore somewhere still out of sight. 6. The truth is the end happens all the time, every day. A diagnosis, an eviction, a bullet, a bullet, a bullet. 7. And something intimate waits for us in the bottom of the crock pot soup you started before the emergency alert squealed from your phone. 8. I introduce you to a board game about the end of days, and you laugh, ask if it's called Monopoly. 9. I use vacant as a noun. My city fills with red brick, row home, plywood, windows, bandaging, abandoned past. 10. The truth is our dog is going to slow us down and may be a barrier for entry at northern border crossings. Her chipped smile justifies the risk, and we ask ourselves what weight is worth drowning trying to carry home. 11. Every bird becomes a vulture, every animal a scavenger, every tooth in our clutch of pearls shaped to tear. 12. The truth is the end isn't here yet. The truth is the end has already begun. 13. Vigilant on the concrete lip, the blackbird remains unfazed by the panic of footsteps slapping across a parking lot. Thanks, y'all. This next poem's after Dr. Fauci and the poet Rilke, and it's titled... Yeah, good guess. You cannot save here. After 148 days inside, this is a pandemic poem. I was writing these poems about the end of the world for like last 4 years, and right in the middle of it, the world ended for us. We had a global pandemic. This is one of those poems. After 148 days inside, stacked end to end, from hoodie and heater to straining central air, I reconsider the body problem. On one hand, who needs hands? A rib cage stuffed with disquiet, the soft tissue of desire, that dark center where the narrative gets jammed up. But fuck, do you remember the four of us and both dogs tucked into a hatchback, howling Dolly lyrics till we went raspy? Or do you recall stone soup picnics in the park, the mosquitoes mauling my leg as we passed my favorite gay poems back and forth in the grass? You held open the thin book with one hand, pulled a pit from your sucking lips with the other. I used my index fingernail to press tiny crosses into the raised pink of my skin. You cannot save here. The 700th day of the end, I don't do anything. Let my circadian rhythm slip loose by rising with the midday hum of lunch rush bustle outside city window. Sweater weather in December suggests the end continues to sputter along, slowly enough we don't panic at its approach. I roll myself out of plush nest and pour an afternoon coffee as winter spills the golden hour early, and I spring myself into evening, then night, then the hours when even the moon puts her phone away, when I'm feeling like the only person left on a broken planet. Sometimes I keep the lights out, stand in the center of carpeted blue rooms during the witching hour, wonder what I'm doing with myself. And it's not that we were wrong about it all coming down. It's that we've gotten used to it. No sudden flood, no final kiss, just a slow goodbye of ice in a sweating rocks glass. Here, then less here, then not here. Thanks, y'all. I have one more poem before I go, though. Afterwards, we're going to come back up. We'll do some Q&A before us signing. Again, I want to thank Caroline and Jonah and all of the press who came out and all the work you did for both these books. Make sure you get Suzanne's book. It's amazing. It's so good. I can't wait for you to read these stories. So not every single poem in the book is titled You Cannot Save Here. This is one of them that I'm going to end with. And it's about, in spring of 2001, winter was giving way to the warm weather, and we had been vaccinated, and like Delta and Omicron hadn't showed its head yet, and we were like, oh, we made it through, and there's this gorgeous optimism. This is a poem written during that optimism, and it's titled The City That Returns is the City. I walk by a body sprawled out in the grass in a park that's been empty for a year, and there's something about spring that summons Savasana before corpse. There's hubris in the crocuses littering color across the city, in the tail end of the plague year, in the tail end of the Anthropocene. The city that returns is the city that was before. For better or worse, the world that returns is still dying. 2, I'm not out here trying to be a poet who writes about flowers, just Hermes loves the boy so much he tags his man's name in thawing parks every April. Purple crown, golden halo, perennial bottom. 3, the crocus's hubris rhymes with optimism. The spring sings the same myth as the fall. You cannot save here. Thank you all so much for coming out.
So if anybody has any questions for our absolutely fabulous writers, you should step right over here. This is being auto recorded for Politics and Prose, so say your question loud and proud.
Yeah, it's really helpful to use this mic because of the recording. But if anybody for mobility issues or just because you're shy can't get up, we can pass a mic around.
Hi, maybe I'll ask the first question. Is this on? I don't know. Could you talk maybe a little bit about the structure of your books? Like, what are the ways in which you felt, did you have to restructure a lot of reformatting? Or how did you decide for the organization? Either one.
Yeah,
Suzanne?
you want to start? You go first. Sure. Mine was mostly organized when I got it. I did, so the cool thing about Washington Writers Publishing House, for those of you here who aren't from the press, is that we get full manuscript feedback from all of the people in our genre who are part of the judging committee. So what that means is I got 7 full manuscript feedback from 7 brilliant, talented, published poets with Ph.D s and long careers. It was incredible. But most of that was like line edit, not a lot of structural stuff. Like the structure was sort of in place, and that's because it's roughly chronological. Like I think the first part are a lot of the poems that I wrote about the end of the world prior to the pandemic. The middle section is a section about the apocalypse on screen, so it references a lot of like pop culture and music and television. And then the third part of the book is really largely about poems about quarantine and pandemics, and also just other stuff that was written during that period. So that was sort of in place. But there were some changes because I got all this gorgeous feedback during the revision process, including the rearranging of some poems who fit better in one section or the other.
I just threw my stories on a floor. That's not true. We really, again, we had excellent editing. It was awesome. And the only thing we really did was move the story. Oh my God, I can't remember the title. Well, anyway, one of the stories, the Lapido Child, which is a story about a young guy from Boston who goes south during the Depression. We moved that from the front because that was my powerhouse. And we decided it was better toward the end, and that the title story was going to be the vehicle that carried the narratives, the multiple narratives, to the end. But the first story, which I agreed with, and I think is a really good story, is called Untitled Number 20, which I think is a great way to start a book with an untitled story, and it's funny. So I like to start with a laugh. So.
Any other questions?
So I was going to ask Suzanne a question. So your stories are really funny.
Thank you.
It's hard to be funny in print. Can you talk a little bit about how you weave like humor into your work?
I have to entertain myself before I entertain anybody else. And if I think it's dull or stupid, like I started writing this story recently called The Baby Ate the Mushroom. And I was like, no, this is not going anywhere despite the title. Because I really want to write stories about how people like discovered different foods and how they named animals and things like that. But I don't know if that's ever going to happen. But I like writing funny stuff. Humor is hard, and sometimes it was just really, you have to know a lot about when to deliver the punchline. And I credit this knowledge to having taught high school art for almost 30 years, where you have to be like, they're not listening. Those kids aren't listening. So every 30 seconds, you have to throw in something really funny and bizarre, otherwise they will not pay attention. So I credit my high school experience with that. Thank you. That's an excellent question.
Well, that leads very much to my question, which was to ask you, Suzanne, because several of your stories deal with visual art. And I wanted to know more about your relationship to visual art, either as an artist. Now I've discovered you were an art teacher. But could you talk a little bit more about that form and that discipline and how it segues with your literary life?
Well, I think one thing about art is, especially if you go to an art school, is that you got to have 6 hours of homework for every class. And so if you're taking, 4 classes, that you have no free time or time to sleep, and eating is really just an option. So when I write, I treat it like a job. And it's, it's like, from 10 to 2 every day I do something, whether or not something comes, like the baby ate the mushroom. But it's, for the painting, I will admit here in public that I am not a good painter. Never have been. And I don't actually know how I graduated from art school. It's really still a mystery to me. But I can write about it. And if you'd like to see my attempts, go to my Instagram page, which is Suzanne Feldman Author at Instagram.
Did you go to Micah?
I did. I love Micah. It was just like this little dream. And I don't know if I answered your question, but okay.
I kind of actually have another question for Anthony.
Oh, yeah.
So all that you cannot save here. how would you like people to read those? Because they're not always in sequence. There are poems that come in between them. So if I were to reference your first one, you cannot save here, do you think I should put like a parentheses, you cannot save here,
Yeah.
and then that first line?
Yeah.
Or what are the ways in which you could orient a reader with all the same titles?
Yeah, that's actually something I thought of when I was putting it together and was wondering how it was going to work. Like, there's like 4 of these poems that are published outside before the book are published. And like, how does that work for SEO? Like, you're going to Google "you cannot save here" and you're going to get the book or any of these poems. How do you reference? I was just on the radio on Friday, and she asked, "Can you read the poem that starts on page 40?" Because she couldn't just say, "Can you read "you cannot save here"?" Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like. I know. I like the troublemaking aspect of it. That it causes trouble and all that. It's kind of fun. Yeah, specifically probably just like when I reference them, I'll reference the poem that starts. That's funny though, because like 3 of those "you cannot save" poems start with my favorite apocalypse. So.
If you get the next slide. Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh yeah, right on.
Yeah. So I know that video games are a part of your collection. And, and I love the title. But is it like something that you see on screen when you get to a point in a video game?
Yeah, it's a lot of things. Yeah, that's why I chose the title. I love the phrasing because it references like video games. So for those of you who've been gamers, particularly gamers for a while, because this isn't a trend anymore, but when you save your game, you save your progress in a game. For a long time, that wasn't autosave, and so you did it at save points. And when you tried not at save points, you got the message "you cannot save here."
I think that's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah, but you also get it on like Microsoft Word has this as an error message. It's also meant to like invoke like religiosity, right? Like the idea of saving things and disaster generally. But yeah, I came up with games, and games are a big part of my like poetics and my like personal literary canon, and so yeah, like it makes sense that I'd reference in the work.
I
video
love
games.
its multi-leveled.
Do you game? Are you a gamer?
No.
You should be. You should be. I'll introduce you to some games.
Okay.
Like, yeah.
I don't have time,
Yeah.
but I'll try.
The cover is from a video game, actually. There's this artist.
kidding.
Geography of Robots is a visual arts and video game collective, and they just have a new game called Norco that's out. And Norco is actually really cool. It's also like a small personal story in a post-apocalyptic setting, and so I was really excited that like the poems are in conversation with that video game now because of the cover. Here's the thing. A good video game, a good narrative game, is similar to the experience of reading a novel.
Yeah.
And so if you cut time out it's more time, granted, but if you cut time out for a novel, you can cut like 40 hours out of your life for
40
Horizon
hours?
Zero Dawn.
40 hours. I don't know.
My friend Liz here plays a lot more and knows 40 is the understatement.
The last video game I played was Myst.
Oh, Myst is classic. Yeah.
Myst is classic.
Yeah.
And then it just became like roller coasters that you
Yeah.
had to have cheat codes for.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was like, well, this is just
Yeah.
not me. So, yeah.
Myst, for those who know, it was like part of it was solving puzzles, but part of it was just exploring a digital world.
I
What's
loved
lovely about
that.
it.
I loved that, yeah. The observatory or whatever that thing was. Yeah. It was awesome. I might be convinced to return to Myst. Does anybody else have a question?
Hi, Anthony. First,
Hi,
I just want
friend.
to say what a pleasure it was to watch you read this today. It's very touching. My question for you is, I noticed a lot of your references to other literature, other poets. Did you intentionally set out to honor those poets when you created this collection, or was it just sort of an organic part of the process?
That's a great question. Yeah. So for me, I think not just for me, for so many writers, right? For so many writers, we don't pluck anything from nothing, right? All of our work comes from the literatures we've read, the stories we've read, the images we've seen, all the things that are in our head. And so for me, it's just being really intentional about identifying those things and speaking to them directly. And that's like a really old tradition, I think, at least like early modernism tradition, right? And so I want to do that. It just so happens that unlike, whereas like, Eliot's is all like religious stuff and the classic English canon, mine's like video games. It's also like opera and visual art and pop music. I think like Amy Mann is referenced in the book. and it's I think it's a long tradition. I'm just doing it with more contemporary references. So yeah, part of it's meant to honor, and part of it's just meant to transparently point to, hey, this had an influence on me. This impacts my poetry and my way I see the world. It's a lovely question. Thank you. It's so good seeing you, friend. This is my friend from the Army, everybody. In another life, I was in the Army. Yeah. Yeah. Write a memoir. Yeah, that's true. That is true. Anyone else? Questions, comments before we wrap up?
I mean, this has been absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming.